Chapter 13. Apprentice DJ. I had been worrying about my media career for a while now. Of course, I was sacrificing it for the sake of God, peace and the unemployed youth of North Belfast. But I had not completely let go of my broadcasting aspirations, even though the BBC had turned me down. I wondered if this rejection might have been as a result of my voice. Very few of the presenters I heard on Radio Ulster in those days spoke with a normal Northern Ireland accent. They talked about Ulster and Northern Ireland and interviewed very clever people who adored the arts and celebrated the latest triumph at the theatre. The presenters at Downtown Radio, Northern Ireland's only commercial station, didn't sound local either, more mid-Atlantic, which was odd as most of them came from County Down. But the station did have a lot more listeners. As a young man, I had been a devotee of BBC Radio 1 and Radio Luxembourg, but Downtown had always been the local radio station of choice in our house. My parents rarely tuned into anything else, apart from the British Army frequency to find out where a bomb had exploded or which roads were blocked. Downtown Radio was as distinctively Northern Ireland as potato bread and petrol bombs. It was the only local radio station with commercial breaks, and it seemed to me that the whole broadcasting operation was paid for by adverts for Martin Phillips carpets and Ferguson flowers. I spent most of my school years being driven to school to the sound of Ivan Martin and Richard Young's breakfast show during the week, and enjoying an Ulster fry at the weekend, accompanied by Big T, Derek Marsden and Candy Devine. Big T was the biggest country and western presenter not to come from Nashville, and he exclaimed, "Yes indeedy," almost as often as he played Philomena Begley records. My late granny had treasured the signed photograph of Big T that sat on her mantelpiece, describing him as a lovely big fella with his moustache and all. Candy Devine was a big and beautiful caftan-wearing Australian singer with a voice that made me feel like warm chocolate was being poured slowly into my ears. Candy had moved to Northern Ireland in the 1960s and had ultimately become the broadcasting mammy for the whole of Northern Ireland. Her best and most accurate jingle was, "She's so sweet, she's so fine, Candy Devine." Such were the advances in technology that listeners could phone Downtown Radio with a request, and Derek Marsden would play their granny's favourite song live on the air on his very own organ within minutes. Derek Marsden also played hymns on a Sunday morning to a huge audience and delighted the believers of Mid-Ulster by playing the Reverend William McRae singing a country gospel version of the Old Rugged Cross in an American accent. The combination of William McRae's Free Presbyterianism and DUP Unionist politics was music to the ears of the County Antrim Bible Belt, although Daniel O'Donnell's version of What a Friend We Have in Jesus brought a certain cross-community balance. The presenters in Downtown Radio were household names and local celebrities in Northern Ireland. If you managed to get Big T to open your church jumble sale, you were lucky indeed. By 1987, Downtown Radio had been rebranded as DTR-FM and was playing the latest hits as well as a selection of songs invariably described as an oldie but a goodie to attract a younger audience as well as grannies listening on AM and country and western aficionados from Portadown. The radio station, based in the Kiltunga Industrial Estate in Newtownards, produced a remarkable variety of specialist programmes on the arts, sport, folk, rock and gospel. This was all very impressive, but as a young and trendy evangelical Christian, I was aware that Downtown Radio did not yet have a rock gospel programme. I was a member of the Word Record Club, which sent me a featured contemporary Christian music album every month. These were usually very well produced by American singer-songwriters such as Larry Norman, Amy Grant and Stephen Curtis Chapman, whose music was as good as anything on Radio 1, but with a focus on loving God rather than your girlfriend. DTR-FM was trying hard to appeal to a younger audience, but their gospel music programmes, although very popular, featured a selection of music that I considered old-fashioned and embarrassing. So I decided to write a letter to John Rossborough, the head of programming, to suggest a programme called Rock Spell, which would be a clever combination of rock and gospel and not embarrassing at all. I was about to leave the house for a busy day of assisting with job applications in the unemployed club and submitting funding applications when I noticed a letter in a Downtown Radio branded envelope lying on the welcome mat. Farah was sniffing at it furiously. "Les!" I cried excitedly. Lesley emerged from the bedroom with a half-made-up face and joined me at the front door, where I stood with the white envelope in my hand. I took my time opening it. I was preparing myself for either great disappointment or the beginning of my trajectory toward Oprah Winfrey scale success. Farah could tell this was a crucial family moment and scratched at my calves with her paws. I took a deep breath and opened the envelope. John Rossborough was inviting me to Downtown Radio with a selection of my rock gospel albums. He wanted to record me introducing a few tracks to hear what I sounded like on the radio and to get more of a sense of the programme I was proposing. Lesley hugged me. I kissed my lovely wife, and Farah, sensing the excitement, peed on the carpet. A few weeks later, I arrived at the security gate of Downtown Radio with an armful of LPs and a well-rehearsed script for a 15-minute pilot recording of Rockspell. John Rossborough met me at reception and welcomed me with the smooth voice that I knew well from his Take It Easy programme. I was soon to learn that the other presenters called the head of programming JR. To all aspiring DJs, this man had all the power of a Dallas oil baron, although he was a much nicer person than J.R. Ewing, and unlike the country and western DJs, I never once saw him wearing a Stetson on the Kiltunga industrial estate. On this debut visit, JR ushered me into Downtown Radio and the record library, which was filled with shelves and shelves of thousands of 33s and 45s, and which smelt of cigarettes and vinyl. I was surrounded by decades of the best selection of pop and country music that had entertained the population of Northern Ireland since Downtown Radio was launched in the 1970s. I wanted to search every shelf for rare and beautiful records like Frida from ABBA's solo albums. It was hard to believe that I was actually standing in the heart of the music. I could not have been further away from the unemployment and intimidation and insults on the peace line. My father, for years the DJ at the Westie Disco, would have been so proud to have seen me standing there, on the cusp of becoming a professional DJ on his favourite radio station. He used to scorn the English-based BBC stations he heard me listening to, mainly because they never gave traffic updates for Northern Ireland. But with Downtown Radio, you were always certain to be kept abreast of heavy traffic at the Sandy Knowes roundabout at Glengormley. I was about to have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to become a famous presenter on Downtown Radio's hallowed airwaves. After a tour of the gospel music section in the library, which mainly consisted of country and choirs, JR led me down the corridor towards the studios with their large, heavy padded doors. We passed the news booth where at that very moment, live on the air and right in front of my very eyes, a newsreader was informing the whole of Northern Ireland about who had been shot dead at their front door that day. I could see a telephone sitting on the padded desk in front of the newsreader and realised this may well have been the actual phone the IRA called with their coded bomb warnings. We passed the main studio where a red light indicated a live broadcast was in progress. When I peered through the window, I was excited to see the famous face of Big T smiling and smoking. It was hard to believe that I was within feet of a radio star, just as he was probably saying into the huge microphone in front of him some famous words like, "Yes indeedy, righty-do, and here comes Hank Williams just for you." I was already nervous at the thought of my imminent audition, but my close proximity to a major celebrity set my heart racing. We entered a small recording studio through another set of heavily padded doors. In front of us was a console of lights and buttons as impressive as the bridge on the Starship Enterprise. There were two shiny steel turntables on either side of a mixing desk, and large cassette machines with oversized cassettes marked jingles, located above the control panel with indicators showing the sound levels. I began to understand that they used this state-of-the-art equipment along with every conceivable muffling material from floor to ceiling to achieve the perfect FM sound quality I had experienced on my radio for years. John told me to take my time and get myself organised, and I took a few deep breaths to calm my nerves. He would cue up the music on the turntables, and all I had to do was speak without stuttering. I handed him my sample albums by Amy Grant, Cliff Richard and Stryper, a heavy metal band whose lead singer screamed about Jesus instead of Satan. The first track in my pilot was to be Jesus Makes Me Wanna Sing by Stryper. Hello and welcome to Rockspell with me, Tony Macaulay, here on DTR. Gospel music like you've never heard it before. Cue Stryper heavy metal guitar intro. John Rossborough listened carefully as the pilot proceeded, but gave nothing away. I couldn't tell whether my audition was going well or as badly as my audition at the BBC a few years earlier, when they had laughed at my mispronunciation of Magabry. JR wasn't laughing at me, but he wasn't giving me any positive feedback either. After recording the pilot segment, he thanked me politely and ushered me back up to reception, just as the real live Candy Divine was arriving in a beautiful caftan with an armful of LPs. Candy smiled and said hello. She was every bit as big and warm in real life as she sounded on the radio. Now I had met a star, albeit briefly. I couldn't wait to tell my mother. I was certain this would cheer her up, although she would also know that this new career would have made my father incredibly proud, so it would probably upset her even more in the end. Have you pitched this to anyone else? Asked John Rossborough seriously as he bade me goodbye. No, I replied. His expression didn't change at my response, but I was hopeful that he was thinking that he might need to snap me up quickly before the BBC could spot my great potential. I heard nothing for weeks. Sometimes when I was on duty in the back room of the salt shaker, when I should have been concentrating on trying to win at least one game of pool against one of the lads, or keeping an eye on the fire exit door to ensure the contents of the tuck shop were not being removed under my nose, I daydreamed of a telephone call from John Rossborough offering me a series. Then, inevitably, my mind would go to the negative place that assumed that nothing this good would ever happen to me. Eventually, one evening, I was outside the house, busily washing the Renault 5 and trying to stop Farah from barking at passing soldiers, when Lesley ran out. "It's John Rossborough from Downtown Radio on the phone," she gasped. "Oh, my nerves!" I dropped my chamois and the bucket and tripped over Farah as I ran toward the telephone in the hallway. Lesley stood close beside me, trying to listen. "Congratulations, Tony," said JR. "We'd like to offer you a pilot show." I calmly accepted the offer and thanked him politely for believing in me, and took a note of the practical details of what would come next on my journey to the airwaves. As soon as I hung up, Lesley and I hugged and jumped up and down so boisterously that we scared Farah and she hid under the stairs. Perhaps dreams could come true. Maybe I could make a difference on the airwaves, if not on the streets. I could bring to the people of Northern Ireland songs of love and peace and reconciliation, and God would use me as a messenger of good news to help bring an end to all the fighting. As I gushed out all of these thoughts and dreams, Lesley hugged me and advised me to calm down and keep it in perspective. I phoned my mother immediately. "Guess what?" I said proudly. "What's wrong?" she asked. Ever since my father died, my mother assumed every phone call was going to be more bad news. "Nothing's wrong," I said. "It's good news for our family for a change." "What?" "You're speaking to the newest presenter on Downtown Radio." "What?" My mother cried with a mixture of joy and grief, and I promised to call over later to tell her all about it. When I arrived, everyone in the family and half the street had already been told about my exciting news.